How coronavirus fooled every body in the world. How coronavirus is going to fool your body if you're infected with coronavirus. How coronavirus has fooled every body that is killed or sick and infected right now. We're going to explain how that is, how that happens through a protein called glycoprotein 120, but this is not going to be a technical explanation. This is just going to offer you forensic proof of how the coronavirus is a bioweapon, how the coronavirus is a bioweapon. And when you understand how this protein fooled every body in the world, everybody who's infected in the world this affects, everyone who died from this affects, and everyone who currently is in some kind of social distancing around the world is affected by this. So this is very critical information that I'm about ready to impart. This comes from a study, scientific study with a lot of doctors from the University of New Delhi. They also had a University of Michigan doctor. So again, not my speculation. These are people, and I can tell you after reviewing their methodology exactly how this happened. But I'll give a simple analogy here. Hello, England, this morning. I'm always interested to see what part of the UK people are dialing in from. So the analogy here is the bat virus of this COVID-19 that is shared by the virus that is infecting the people who died, the people who are infected, and potentially you. 96.3%. That's a high degree of analog, if you will. A lot of homogeneousness there, very little heterogeneousness, okay? So that's important to understand. But even more important to understand is your body had a natural defense for this. It recognized this bat virus as something not good, and your body naturally mounted an attack to it until this envelope, this glycoprotein 120, this GP120, was put around it to fool you and fool your body and fool the body of everyone who's died, fool the body of everyone who's currently infected, and fool the body of all the targets that remain. So again, important information, right? So let's dive down a little bit into this study and unwind glycoprotein 120, see where it came from. The analogy here being, if somebody came to your door and had a box, let's see, this is mineral water here that's at our charrette house, and it arrived like that, and it was a bunch, and it said bat virus on it. All those bottles said bat virus. You'd look at the bottle, and you'd walk out to your door, you'd look at the bottle, and you would say, oh, mountain bat water virus. I don't want to bring that in to my house. This is your cell. This house here is your body. Okay, your cell's your body. And you see it says clearly bat virus. You say, hey, I don't want to bring the bat virus in. But if I was to put a box around it, right, that said, a label on it that said Mountain Valley spring water. You can see we drink a lot of Mountain Valley spring water here. You may be inclined to bring it into your house. Maybe somebody else in the house, here 13 people or whatever, 10 people at the charrette house, maybe somebody else ordered it and will bring it into the house because we don't recognize the envelope. Let's say it comes in a FedEx box, okay? It comes in a wrapping, in an envelope that we don't recognize, but we recognize as maybe similar to other things that our bodies come in contact. So we don't send it back to Amazon and Geis and Bezos. We bring it in, we put it in our refrigerator. Little do we know that is where the virus replicates. It gets to a food source. That's how the viruses work. They co-opt and sell machinery, and they make their virus, and then you bringing in the virus, you create a whole bunch more bat viruses to go infect thousands of more houses, and so on and so on. That's how it works. Now, why is looking at how that actually happens, how your body is fooled by this glycoprotein, envelope protein, why is that important understanding that it's a bioweapon? The reason why it's important to understand it's a bioweapon is it comes directly from HIV. HIV-1 specifically used that exact same glycoprotein 120. 120 is just the molecular weight of the protein. So that's how they can distinguish it from a sister protein called glycoprotein 41, which is lighter. So glycoprotein 120 is the same thing that HIV-1 was used, okay? Now, if you're trying to kill a whole African population, if you're the minorities in South Africa, you could say, back in 1986, during the days of apartheid, you may want to take transfect virus from another animal and put it inside a glycoprotein 120 and then put it in the water supply or the food supply in South Africa. I'm not saying that that's where this came from. We do have a Dr. Fauci in 1986, very involved with glycoprotein 120 in the whole AIDS. And again, I was involved in a volunteer citizen science effort back then with trying to find a solution to AIDS. So we do have this kind of odd connection back to Dr. Fauci all the way in with glycoprotein 120, all the way back to 1986, which is a little scary. And also this Dr. Burke's, which is scary. But let's leave that aside for a minute. Let's talk about what the scientists said about glycoprotein 120. The scientists said that it's an 885 amino acid protein. Proteins are made of amino acids. You think of it, little Lego blocks making into a building or something. So it's 885 of those. Now, the protein that your body attaches to, whether you decide to let the bat virus in the house or not, right? That is the S protein. This is the spike protein, or the thing that looks like a corona, okay? That's a 1225 base amino acid. Now here is the key fact that they pointed out in the study, that the New Delhi scientists pointed out in the study. Remember, there's collaboration all over the world in this literature, okay? And I'll tell you what part of their study was speculation in a second, but they said, we looked at not one, not two previous coronaviruses, not three previous coronaviruses and related viruses like SARS. We looked at coronavirus alpha, beta, gamma, delta, 4 different varieties, and we looked at 3 other seemingly engineered viruses, but they left that part out. 7 different coronaviruses have zero of those 885 glycoproteins. Amino acid coding segments. Paul Cottrell was correct. There's 4 segments. There's 4 coding segments. There's 4 HIV coding segments. They're not continuously spread. You don't just find a section of 885 stuck into the F. You do is they're interspersed. But still, chemically, that's just like bringing them together. And then the speculation of the New Delhi study was they find all 885 from this key glycoprotein 120 going all the way back to 1986, and Anthony Fauci fooling the body to get a virus not to be attacked by your immune system. Those all 885 amino acids are found in the S protein, not found in the previous 6 coronaviruses. That does not happen in nature. 5 or 6 segments, yes. 10 or 12, yes. 0 in all 6 previous hybrids, 6 in all previous coronavirus, and now all 885 necessary for the assembly of that box that's going to fool every space body in the world. Put the Amazon box, the Jeff Bezos Geist box around it and get you to bring it into your house, right? That is glycoprotein 120. And the only speculation that was done by the University of New Delhi is these 4 separate sections. There's 4 variable coding sections. It's called V, V1, V5, V4, and V5. I guess V2 and V3 were taken by Werner von Braun. But V, V1, V5, 4, and V5. Those are the separate sections, encoding sections. Paul Cottrell was correct in that. And I now know, because I went the further depth in the biochemistry, what the exact amino acid sequences were. And the only speculation by the New Delhi scientists were that these 4 discontiguous segments assembled once the mRNA had transcribed their code, that they were then assembled as one protein to make one glycoprotein 120. It's awfully hard to make glycoprotein 120 if you don't get all 885 of those amino acids assembled. So they're not, remember, just one amino acid being different, just one DNA pair being different can completely change the whole how the protein folds, okay? Just one. So getting 885 right, that's like getting 885 words in a spelling bee right that no one has ever heard before, all these words that no one's ever heard before. You would start to think, hey, this thing's rigged. This is a CRISPRed bioweapon here. You basically just took the same things that you were working on back in South Africa. Again, I'll go to the history of Fort Detrick here, the sad history of Fort Detrick and the sad history of NIH and the infiltration of NIH for people who would broker out and pay to have these bioweapons unleashed on their own indigenous populations. Of course, a lot of people mention the Hudson Bay Company did this in the South Bend area when the French explorers were coming through, and a lot of Custer was no stranger to disease blankets, so biowarfare is not a new concept, but this is affecting us now, wiping our savings out, wiping our homes out, taking our homes, taking our businesses. So this is relevant now. And you should know, you as a potential target anywhere in the world watching this, that this is how your body is being fooled. And if you believe that all of a sudden, one day, the previous attempts at this kind of worldwide pandemic virus failed, mainly SARS and also MERS, which is Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. The reason why it failed is because of this problem, where most of the people's bodies that read it said, hey, bat virus, it's not Mountain Valley spring water, it's bat virus, right? I don't want it, and it never got started in the body. That's why there was relatively low deaths with the bioweapon, SARS bioweapon, and relatively even fewer deaths with the MERS bioweapon. And the only thing that was changed at Fort Detrick, and we're going to get to Fort Detrick in a second, was the stealth, was the disguise, was the thing to fool your body, was the glycoprotein 120. That's the only thing that kept the SARS and MERS virus from lethality. Not lethality in the virus, but lethality in the reach of the virus, the spreadability of the virus. But this glycoprotein also allows the virus to hang around at different temperatures, whereas the other virus doesn't do so well in the wild, if you will. So that's very important. And again, what I love about this in-depth, detailed research is that it's confirmable. Every scientist around the world immediately knows what I'm talking about. Every scientist around the world immediately, just without even looking at the literature, says, yeah, he's right. That doesn't happen in nature. You accumulate mutations gradually in a virus. A virus only needs to live to next year. A virus doesn't want to kill the host. A virus doesn't CRISPR itself in the lab. It makes small mutations. It makes small mutations to go on living happily. And if you think about it from the virus's point of view, you're happily living in a forest, let's say, in a cave out in Yunnan, right? Yunnan, in China, in a very remote area, not near any humans at all. And one day, a doctor with her team comes climbing up into where you live, all right? And this is Dr. Zhengli, right? And she, from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, again, sponsored by USAID, not USAID directly, but DTRA, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, and this cooperative NATO program with her biology institute. That's why she has people flying back and forth to Winnipeg. That's why she has her Winnipeg scientists going back and forth to Fort Detrick. And they take this virus out of the bat. They transfect it. Remember, it's 96.3% homologous, analogous to the virus that's killing all these people right now. But it doesn't get in the door. The immune system stops it at the door. They say bat virus. Your immune system recognizes it a bat virus. That person has to take a needle, put it into the centrifuge fecal matter of the bat, draw out and separate all the things that are in the paste, if you will, to just get to isolate that one virus, okay? Then that virus has to then be amplified through something called a PCR machine, which again is a biolab practice. It was invented, I can't remember who invented it, but I used to know. But anyway, PCR is the idea of heating it up, making some more, cooling it down, heating it up, making some more, cooling it down, sort of like a washing machine, if you will, and a dryer kind of thing. Just excuse me one second. Anyway, I want to say Terry somebody, but anyway, I talked to him once before, the guy who invented the PCR. But anyway, it's a biochemical process in a lab. It doesn't happen. Back then, PCR machines were tough to come by, but now they're plentiful. But it still requires a lab person to do this amplification. Then you have to then transfect it into all these different species to see what's going to be your best intermediate to then infect a human population. This is bioweapons design, okay? That did happen. We know that anteaters potentially were used. We know that snakes potentially were used. We know that all kinds of different mice, rats, we know cats, dogs, we know rhesus monkeys being the closest analog genomically to the humans, were all infected. And we have interviewed people. This is the part I want to emphasize. We've interviewed people at Fort Detrick that did this day in, day out. Ask the people who worked at Fort Detrick. They'll tell you this is what they did. Transfecting is what they did, okay? So now let's look at why did SARS fail as a bioweapon and why did MERS fail as a bioweapon? Because they lack this glycoprotein 120. Okay, who was there in designing these things at that time? Is there any hint of scandal? You've talked a lot about Dr. Bavari. You've talked a lot about the scandal in August of 2016. You've talked a lot about the breach in 2019. You talked about him starting all these companies with the University of Nebraska, these 4 different biotechs. You've talked a lot about that, but what about MERS? What about SARS in those days? Wouldn't that be the root of it? If those were the failed bioweapons, then wouldn't the roots go back to the beginning there, for the original SARS bioweapon and the original MERS bioweapon? And yes, the answer is true. Yes, the person who ran the U.S. Medical Command for Northcom was a guy by the name of George Waitman. Easy to remember, George. I'm a George. He's a George. And Waitman, hopefully, that's easy to remember as well. And he was fired from his job, if you remember the scandal, at Walter Reed Hospital for uncleanliness, right? And no paint on the walls and so forth. But it was covering up a much bigger thing that was happening, which was the charter of the Fort Detrick changed from the Cold War creating bioweapons to the post-Cold War, after the fall of the Soviet Union, to biodefense. This means you don't go around creating SARS and you don't go around creating MERS. You will find when the cold light of day hits all the facts here, that's the real reason George Waitman was relieved of his command. And his predecessor was, I believe, even more involved, which is George Korsch. Another George, K-O-R-C-H, both colonels. It's the colonel level. There's a general that oversees the whole medical command. U.S. MRI ID, which is the Fort Detrick lab, is run by a colonel. And then there's a colonel that comes in after that called Skvorak, kind of like the Dvorak keyboard, S-K-V-O-R-A-K. Okay, this is the critical time period. Not saying that these folks were directly involved financially and had something to gain, these colonels, for this bioweapons development, but the lab did switch to an offensive footing. Now you can play semantic games with, hey, we had to develop the bioweapon in order to develop the defense, but we've talked to, remember Task Force and I going up there and talking to bioprotesters, talking about the monkey labs, talking about killing the monkeys with the bio testing, talking about the monkeys in the 8-ball, right? If you don't know the atomizer machine, the 8-ball machine to test the effectiveness of bioweapons, it's called the 8-ball. They put the monkeys in the 8-ball. They tested these different bioweapons. I believe both SARS and MERS in these formative years, 2003, going on to 2009, 10, 11, forms the backbone of when this transition happened between, biodefense, which was what they were doing, to bio offense, bio weapons. Okay, and it's very important to understand the history of SARS and MERS and who was running the place, and the fact that if you look at what they're doing now, again, it follows the Bavari example. George Korch, who was running that group, now is at Battelle, running biodefense at Battelle. So all the response to this current situation, who's the benefactor? George Korch. Now that's just not a good thing, given the fact of all of our research around Battelle in Columbus, Ohio, all the nuclear diversion at Battelle. We have the Farsi trucking company going back and forth there with seemingly everyone in the company speaking Farsi. Okay, that's transport logistics. We also have that same Farsi trucking company in Fort Detrick. We go to the place. We even task force walking on the ice is saying there's something else back here in these small places, and the two Farsi-speaking daughters of Mark Lambert come running out and stop her, right? She definitely felt like this was more of a house of horrors than I did when we went out to the transport logistics location and out near in Frederick, Maryland, when we went out there in the snow. So that's what we have to look at is why has Peter Strzok, Farsi speaking, there in Tehran at the fall of the Iranian regime? His father's there working with all the tribes. We seem to have this endless parade of Hezbollah into Virginia through this channel. We have Imran Awan with all the visas, seemingly putting all these people and preparing all their visas. No background checks. They get stuck into, people like Bavari get stuck into positions of power from Iran into Fort Detrick. It's the classic infiltration strategy. We cannot blind our eyes to it. We have Dr. Fauci. Now, a lot of people have said, no, don't look at Fort Detrick. Don't look at all the violations at Fort Detrick. Don't look at all the generals that were relieved of their command at Fort Detrick. Don't look at all the colonels that ended up going into taking advantage of this at Battelle. Don't look at the Battelle connection with Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Don't look at all the students that were brought in and placed into these different programs all around the country, into our key bioweapons industries. Don't look at the 9 biolabs that the U.S. Defense Threat Reduction Agency is funding for a guy named Kolomoisky. Don't look at any of the way they affected the communication. Don't look at the NATO encryption. Don't look at the military-grade encryption. Don't look at the fact that everyone involved here is communicating with these NATO BlackBerries. Don't look at the media and how these NATO schemes are ordered in the U.S. Well, at some point you have to. At some point you have to say, look, if I see a trail of an open door, if I see an open door at a classified location that's causing the worldwide crisis right now, you got to look at the open door and look at all the circumstances around the open door. If somebody discontinues the biocourier program, which would seem like exactly the opposite, it should have been a Manhattan Project to find out who opened the door, but instead somebody shuts down the biocourier program, the federal agents program at Fort Detrick, the tracking program. That is also a smoking gun. It's like the burglars are leaving 2 smoking guns. They're leaving a smoking machine gun. The fact that they then go on to create 4 bio companies, right, is like they're leaving a smoking arsenal of dumpster of weapons that are all smoking. It just begs the question is, are they people using their positions that were very questionable how they got through the whole background checking process? Again, it seems like Peter Strzok. We talked to Michael McMahon, who actually, the FBI agent who did the background checks of these people. Him saying 660,000 got through with no checking. We have the history of Imran Awan putting all these people into various places like Fort Detrick, right? Like Fort Belvoir. Again, if we go back to the sprayer house and look how close the sprayer house was to Fort Belvoir, it was literally, you could yell instructions at the guardhouse from Jaquaya's house. Again, they are both living there at the sprayer house. The fact that the Freitags run the small business program for GSA, for the military contracts, that they're living there with a Freitag daughter. Imran's living there with a Freitag daughter. These are some of the things you just have to look at. I'm not trying to revive the Awans. I'm just saying this guy here, this General Korch, goes to Johns Hopkins University and is currently the guy running the map that you see. He's currently the guy giving the orders to the people doing the graphs, the Johns Hopkins graphs that you see right now. He's currently the Battelle guy running this whole show, this whole Truman Show, right? So you have to look at that. You can't blind your eyes, especially when you have so many people dying around the world. I believe there's 3 more bioweapons past this. There's a couple of good visualizations out there that show the 5 different classes of bioweapons. But it's going to be glycoprotein 120. You cannot talk about those 885 amino acids got into the S protein. There's no doubting that, and they weren't in the 6 previous breeds variants of this virus. You have to look at SARS, you have to look at MERS as failed bioweapons, you have to look at glycoprotein 120 as the thing that fooled every body in the world.